with Account Corlia. Minister, most people want to help. Most people want to do the right thing for people who are fleeing war and violence. But they also want a system that is fair and sustainable. Most people want a compassionate approach by the government, but they want common sense as well. And Minister, your system so far has been a common sense free zone, and that's the truth of it. We have a government whose policy, I believe, to date, has significantly damaged the goodwill of the people within the country. The first mistake that this government has made is to refuse to listen to the people. Minister, you've got to start listening to the people around the country. Minister Roderick O'Gorman and yourself have in many ways ignored so many communities around the country who wanted to have an input into the process that's happening in their own areas. And not talking to people, that has had the effect of creating a vacuum of information. And that is an ideal location for a petri dish, if you like, for rumours to be created in terms of this system. You've got to remember who's employing you. You're employed by the people. You're the servants of the people. And the fact that Roderick O'Gorman has not met with one community around the country in terms of this is an incredible situation. The other situation is people want a fair asylum process that effectively and efficiently identifies and differentiates between those who need help and those who don't need help. But your policy to date has been extremely lax. A 15% rate of deportations that are enforced, the rest voluntary. And when I ask you in parliamentary questions, you admit that you have no way of confirming a person when they leave the country or not. An incredible situation. You have a situation where so many people are coming into the country without proper documentation. 3,500 in Dublin Airport alone last year. You need a situation, Minister, where there's a penalty for doing that for an individual that comes into the country. And that has to happen to deter people from coming into the country and then damaging their documents or losing their documents. This situation where 86% of the people who came in last year registered at the IPO office instead of at the ports. And when I ask you, Minister, in the parliamentary question, do you know the routes that they come into the country? You said you don't, and you don't ask them that question, which is it's in the parliamentary question you wrote to me, Minister, in the last month, which is an incredible situation as well. And I think at the heart of this problem is that we have a situation where there's no consideration, no planning around the government's policy to find accommodation. And if we're real, the government's policy to find accommodation is lastminute.com, yellow pack situation to find anybody who will give accommodation to them. And what that means is there's no planning around the resources that are necessary. Doctors, dentists, the schools, the housing, the transport. And it's incredible, again, the Minister on radio last Sunday talked about the 50 million euros of community dividends that the government provided. It was announced in 2022, but the parliamentary question back from Minister Heather Humphreys tells us there's only 2.9 million of that spent in a year. In June 2022, your government promised 700 rapid build homes. Less than half of those are actually built. Your government bought 20 buildings for accommodation for asylum seekers, and the last parliamentary question, only one of those has been put into use. So the marshalling of resources in terms of the communities that are accepting people coming into the country, and for those who are coming into the country, has been a disaster. And I would say that, the provision of psychologists, the provision of doctors, of nurses, of people who need to give help to people who have come into the country has been very, very, very poor. I know of people who are ringing my office to see can they get baby formula for the children. These are people who are living in direct provision of locations. So if you want to fix this, if you want to gain the goodwill of the people, I would ask you to first and foremost listen to the people in the communities of Ireland. Make sure that we have a fast, efficient, effective process to identify whether a person needs help or not, and then make sure that the resources are there to make the communities able to accept their new populations and to make those populations properly integrated into those communities.
Thank you very much.